Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Amy Bosley? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Amy Bosley was born in 1967 and grew up in Alexandria, Kentucky. This is a small town 14 miles south of Cincinnati, Ohio. Amy's father had difficulty regulating his intake of alcohol. Her mother was described as a hard worker who wanted a better life for her daughter. In 1986, Amy graduated from high school. She attended a local community college and studied business management as she worked as a waitress in a local restaurant. One of her customers at the restaurant was a man named Bob Bosley. He was about 5 years older than Amy and had just started a roofing company. Bob had a reputation for rambunctious behavior. He had a boat where he would often host wild parties. He invited Amy to these parties, and the couple started dating. They married 4 years later. The couple had 2 children, a daughter named Morgan and a son named Trevor. Bob managed to build his roofing company into a successful business empire. He earned millions of dollars over the course of a few years. The couple was making a lot of money, but they were also spending a lot of money. They hosted a number of alcohol-fueled parties. The couple owned horses, sports cars, a massive house, a small airplane, and, of course, a boat. On the weekends, the family would stay in a luxurious cabin. Eventually, the couple started building a mansion on a 35-acre plot of land. The mansion was being built to look like a castle. As construction was underway, the family lived in their cabin. Amy worked for her husband's roofing business. She took care of the accounting. One of her responsibilities was to mail tax payments to the IRS. Over time, Amy started hiding the tax payments. Like she would write the checks, put them in envelopes, but never mail them to the IRS. She ended up embezzling over $1 million over the course of 5 years. Understandably, the IRS wasn't too thrilled about this behavior. They contacted Amy several times demanding business records and demanding to speak to Bob. They wanted to warn him that he could be relocating to prison. Amy intercepted all the communication from the IRS by setting up a P.O. box. She never sent the business records, and she would not allow the agents to speak to Bob. An IRS agent called the family home and demanded that both Amy and Bob meet with them in person. Amy intercepted the call and impersonated Bob, like she used a different voice in an effort to deceive the agent. The agent would later say that Amy was so terrible at mimicking her husband's voice, she sounded like Kermit the Frog. The IRS decided to set the appointment anyway. At this point, they were not taking no for an answer. It didn't matter if Amy was impersonating Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, or even Fozzie Bear. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. During the early morning hours of May 17, 2005, the 4 members of the Bosley family were in their cabin. This was the same day the IRS was supposed to show up to meet with Amy and Bob. After everybody had been asleep for a while, Amy climbed out of bed and retrieved a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, which was owned by Bob. Amy pointed the weapon at Bob and shot him a few times. Bob attempted to wrestle the pistol away from his wife, but he was in bad shape due to being shot. Amy managed to retain control of the weapon. She shot Bob a few more times in the back as he kneeled over the bed. Bob Bosley did not survive. 9-year-old Morgan and 6-year-old Trevor heard the gunshots and hid under blankets. At this point, Amy called 911. She told the operator that someone had broken into her house and was fighting with her husband. At one point she said, quote, "No, you can't go up there with the kids," unquote, as if she was talking to the intruder. Amy then disconnected the call. She retrieved an aluminum baseball bat and broke the glass in a door in the kitchen to make it look like an intruder had broken in. Amy opened cabinets and pulled out drawers in an effort to support this theory, like the intruder had made entry in order to steal from the house. When the operator called her back, Amy said the intruder left and had shot her husband. The police arrived quickly and found Bob's body. He had been shot 6 times. 3 times in the back, 2 times in his side, and 1 time in his chest. Amy told them the same story that she had delivered on the 911 call. A mysterious intruder was responsible for the homicide. Here's what the police found during their investigation. The house had been ransacked, which could be consistent with an intruder, but nothing was stolen, including hundreds of dollars in cash, which was in plain sight. Some of the open cabinets were in the kitchen, like under the sink. The police thought it was strange that an intruder would be interested in anything that would normally be stored under a sink. Morgan and Trevor told the police that they were woken up by gunshots. Then they heard the sound of glass breaking. They had the same story despite being interviewed separately. Their story contradicted Amy's account. According to her story, the glass would have been broken first, then the gunshots would have occurred. Most of the glass from the broken door was on the outside of the house, as if whoever broke the door was on the inside of the house. Despite being shot 6 times, the police only recovered 2 9mm cartridge cases near the body. They found the other 4 in a washing machine located in the basement of the cabin. It didn't make any sense that an intruder would try to hide cartridge cases in the house. If they bothered to pick them up, why didn't they just take them? The IRS contacted investigators and told them about their problems with Amy, which supplied a possible motive for murder. The police also found another motive. There was a safe in the cabin containing photographs of women in various states of undress. The images had been captured on Bob's boat. He was having at least one extramarital affair. Bob was spending days at a time on his boat with other women and refusing to explain his actions to his wife. The police interviewed Amy. She described the intruder as a white male who was about 5'6". He had a stocking over his face, smelled like urine, and had a speech impediment. Amy tried to pin the murder on one of Bob's friends, who owed Bob money. The police investigated this angle and found that the friend had an alibi. Amy also presented another theory, saying that she knew Bob was cheating on her. Perhaps the intruder was a jealous husband of one of these women who Bob was seeing. The police did not find any evidence that a jealous husband was responsible for Bob's murder. They thought that Amy was the killer, but they did not have the gun. They searched everywhere for it without success. Eventually, Amy's sister contacted an attorney, who in turn contacted the police. Apparently, Amy had put the gun in her purse, and somehow the sister ended up taking the purse away from the cabin. The sister did not know the gun was in the purse until she found it later. I find it amazing that the police did not search people walking away from the crime scene. Why were people just allowed to walk into the cabin and take things? This was a massive mistake that almost prevented Amy from being prosecuted. The police determined that the cartridge cases found at the scene matched the gun found in Amy's purse, and of course the gun was owned by Bob. How would an intruder have obtained Bob's gun and shot him with it? Amy Bosley was arrested and charged with murder. The case against her was now pretty good. Amy normally would have been tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison, but in a stunning turn of events, the state offered her an unbelievable plea bargain. She would plead guilty to first-degree murder and only receive 20 years in prison. With good behavior, she could be released in 17 years. It was an incredible deal for Amy that didn't really make any sense from the state's point of view. The state wanted to prevent Amy's children from having to testify against their mother, but this trade-off was far too generous to a person who murdered a man in cold blood. Amy Bosley was released from prison in May of 2022 at the age of 53. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few items that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. The state believes that Amy used some of the money that she had embezzled to maintain the party lifestyle, and she hid the rest of it. Amy was not required to account for the funds as part of the plea bargain. One would think that the state would have at least gained that concession during negotiating with Amy's attorneys, but here again the state failed. Now that Amy has been released, I wonder if she's going to retrieve the ill-gotten funds. Item number 2. Even though Bob was cheating on Amy, her motive was probably related to the tax evasion. She knew that Bob was going to find out about what she had done on the day that she killed him. Again, this was the day that the IRS was going to meet with them. Amy was running out of time to resolve the situation and decided homicide was her best option. Right after the murder, Amy contacted the IRS and told them that the meeting was not going to happen because Bob was dead. Amy thought that the IRS would simply forget about the tax evasion in light of Bob's death. Like they would say to her, well, we really wanted what was owed, but considering the murder and everything, you can just keep the money. It's the least we can do. Consider it a gift from the IRS. Item number 3. Bob's sister once heard Amy talking about how she would react if Bob ever left her. Amy said that she would shoot Bob in his sleep. If Bob had found out about the tax evasion, he probably would have left Amy, or at least that was what Amy believed. It would appear as though Amy had created a rule in her mind. Bob was either going to be with her or be dead. Item number 4. Amy was not very effective at staging the crime scene and trying to hide her involvement, although she did get lucky initially in her effort to hide the pistol. In every other way, Amy's attempt to stage the crime scene demonstrated no understanding of how an intruder would function. For example, she thought that it made sense for an intruder to look under kitchen cabinets, hide cartridge cases in the house, and leave a witness behind. She tried to make it look as though she had fought off the intruder. Amy cut herself and damaged her clothing by cutting it a little and ripping it the rest of the way. Amy also did not count on her children remembering the order of the sounds that occurred in the house. Item number 5. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Amy and Bob were both lost in worlds of fantasy. Amy was keeping tax payments for herself as if no one would notice. Bob was having at least one affair and spending a lot of time with women on his boat. Both of them should have known that their behavior was unsustainable and would lead to consequences, but they were consumed with self-centeredness, a sense of entitlement, greed, and grandiosity. Their narcissism was so powerful, they were building themselves a castle, but it was a castle in the air. When Amy could no longer dodge the consequences of her behavior, she murdered her husband believing this would eliminate all her problems simultaneously. She committed the crime with her children in the house, which would normally be considered an aggravating factor, but in a strange twist, this actually allowed Amy to escape justice. It motivated the state to offer her a plea deal to prevent the children from testifying. Now moving to my final thoughts. There is a phrase that goes, nothing is certain except death and taxes. The case of Bob and Amy Bosley affirms this assertion. Bob could not avoid death, and Amy could not avoid taxes. This case can be summed up in this way. A husband who fancied himself the head of the household was guilty of withholding affection. His interest was somewhere else, and he was making a number of unauthorized direct deposits. His wife felt as though he was underreporting his bad acts. She had been accruing a different type of antisocial behavior and was aware a penalty was about to be assessed. Eventually, the wife permanently adjusted her husband's gross income and tried to launder the evidence. Although not successful in evading detection, she still managed to avoid full accountability. Those are my thoughts on the case of Amy Bosley. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.